My name is Stacy. I am a housewife living with my husband Patrick and mother-in-law. I just turned 27 and we are in our third year of marriage. We don't have any children yet. My husband tells me not to rush, but my mother-in-law pressures me when we're alone. One day, while my husband was at work, I was alone with my mother-in-law. Suddenly, she sighed heavily and started making snide remarks. Hey, are you infertile? Why don't you have children? I don't think I'm infertile. Then you should have children. Is it because you and your husband don't get along? No, that's not it. That's good then. But if you can't have children, I'll have you divorced. Divorce? Of course. What's the point of having a daughter-in-law? Who can't carry on the family line? That's so cruel. The sneers about not being able to have children escalated daily. Soon, it became a daily occurrence to be rushed for children. I thought about discussing it with my husband. But I didn't want to strain the parent-child relationship, so I refrained. My husband comes from a single-mother family, and he has an older sister, Mandy, who is married and living at her husband's family home. They have been married for over 5 years but still have no children. Thus, my mother-in-law was eagerly awaiting the birth of her first grandchild. However, being rushed didn't feel good, and I was becoming increasingly stressed. Then, one day, I received some good news. Mandy was pregnant. Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law was overjoyed and looked forward to the birth of her grandchild. Since learning of Mandy's pregnancy, she stopped pressuring me. I finally felt relieved from the stress, but it was short-lived. My mother-in-law started saying outrageous things when my husband was not around. Stacy, may I speak with you? What's wrong? When Mandy's child is born, could you please move out of this house? What? Of course, I won't make Patrick leave. Just you. Why? Are you saying we should live apart even though we're married? That's right. I want to prepare a room for my grandchild here. Give your room to my grandchild. This house is originally ours, after all. I absolutely refuse to live apart from Patrick. Are you defying me? You've got some nerve. I'll make sure to drive you out no matter what. The next day, while I was out, my mother-in-law had packed my belongings. When my husband came home and noticed, he became suspicious. Mom, why are you packing Stacy's things? Oh, that. I want to turn Stacy's room into a room for Mandy's child when she's born. A room for the grandchild? Then what about Stacy's room? This is our house originally, right? Stacy's room never existed. It's my house, so I can do whatever I want, can't I? Are you serious? If you do that, we'll stop living together. Why? Aren't you happy about becoming an uncle? That's not the issue. Put Stacy's things back the way they were. Choosing your wife over your mother, I see. I'm disappointed. My mother-in-law said this and went back to her room crying. The next day, she continued trying to pack my things. Don't tell Patrick, she said. And I felt stressed again. Then, one day when Mandy visited our house, she suddenly said something unbelievable. Once the baby is born, can I leave it with you, Stacy? You're a childless housewife, so you must be free, right? Take care of it? Why? Unlike you, Stacy, I'm busy. So become my personal babysitter. That's impossible. Then who will take care of my child? It's tough for just mom, isn't it? Don't you want to raise your own child? That's why I'm busy. Listening to her selfish remarks. My mother-in-law nodded as if it were the most natural thing in the world. When I firmly refused my sister-in-law Mandy's request, she got angry and left. A few days later, Mandy came crying suddenly. "Mom, I had a miscarriage." "What? A miscarriage?" Mandy cried out and clung to our mother-in-law, who also looked like she might start crying any moment. Just a few days ago, we were all talking about the future with the child. I never thought something like this would happen. I was so saddened that I stood frozen. Then Mandy glared at me and screamed, "What are you looking at? Go away." Perhaps she wanted to take her frustration out on someone. Thinking this, I did as she said and went back to my room. From that day, my mother-in-law was in a foul mood. Knowing about Mandy's miscarriage, my husband said, "Let's leave her be for now," and refrained from speaking to her. When my husband went to work, her mood worsened, and she began to vent her irritation by making sarcastic comments to me. "You're so carefree. Mandy had a miscarriage, and you're not even a little upset. That's not true. It's all your fault she miscarried. You refused to be the babysitter." "What? Her miscarriage was because she felt anxious after you refused to babysit. Poor Mandy. It's all your fault. How are you going to take responsibility? Blaming me for Mandy's miscarriage." My mother-in-law began to harass me out of resentment. One day, when my husband and I returned from a meal out on his day off, I found all my belongings thrown out into the hallway. Seeing this, my husband exclaimed, "This is the last straw," and furiously confronted his mother. "Did you do this, Mom?" "Yes, what's wrong with that? Stop it. Stop taking your anger out on Stacy." "I'm not taking my anger out. It's Stacy's fault Mandy miscarried. So what's wrong with taking revenge on her behalf? Stacy's fault? How does that even make sense? Forget it, do whatever you want." With that, my husband took my hand and led me outside. Once we were alone in the car, he apologized. "Sorry for all this. Let's end the cohabitation." "Yeah, that would be best." From then on, we started looking for an apartment to live in, just the two of us. Unaware of this, my mother-in-law continued trying to drive me out alone, and escalated her harassment. She threw away the food I made, and even my favorite clothes. I had been feeling unwell, likely due to stress, with nausea and headaches so severe that there were days I couldn't get out of bed. Noticing this, my husband worried and accompanied me to the hospital on his day off. To our surprise, the hospital visit revealed I was pregnant. My husband and I held hands and rejoiced on the spot. However, I was still concerned about my mother-in-law. What would she say if we announced the pregnancy at this time? For now, we decided not to tell her until I was in a stable period and just take it easy, claiming I was unwell. Morning sickness was so severe that moving wasn't an option. So we put off apartment hunting until I felt better. To reduce stress, my husband suggested I stay at my parents' house while he was at work during the unstable period. I explained to my parents that my mother-in-law was unstable due to Mandy's miscarriage. My parents agreed that leaving her alone for now is the right thing to do, and supported me at home while I struggled with severe morning sickness. Wanting to avoid any stress, I made efforts to stay away from my mother-in-law until the stable period was near. One day, just before entering the stable period, my husband came to pick me up from my parents' house after work, and we returned home together, only to find my mother-in-law and Mandy standing defiantly at the entrance. My husband asked what was going on, and my mother-in-law, looking displeased, pulled something out of her pocket. Upon closer inspection, it was an ultrasound photo from the hospital. "Why do you have that, Mother?" "I found it while snooping through your room." "You're pregnant?" "Give up on it. It would hurt my daughter too much since she just had a miscarriage." "Give up? Why? If you have a child now, it will hurt Mandy, won't it?" Hearing my mother-in-law's words, my husband became angrier than I'd ever seen him. "Don't mess with us." Then Mandy spoke up. "The miscarriage was your fault. I won't let you have this child, understand? Why should I be blamed so much just for being pregnant?" As I thought about this, a feeling of indignation sprouted within me. And the anger I had been suppressing reached its limit and spilled out of me. "I'm cutting ties with my in-laws." My mother-in-law and sister-in-law both responded in unison, "What? You only think about yourselves and never consider our happiness. I don't want to involve my child with people like you anymore." As I said this, my husband continued to agree with me. "I agree with Stacy. Thanks for packing up, Mom. Actually, we've almost decided where to live, so we're leaving soon." My mother-in-law was furious. "Don't decide on your own," but we ignored her and left the house. We stayed at my parents' house that night and signed a lease for an apartment the following weekend. We resolved to end the cohabitation cleanly and distance ourselves from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. Finally, I started living a stress-free life, entered a stable period, and felt completely healthy. My husband also said we should have done this sooner, as my husband and I got used to living together, and my pregnancy became more apparent. My previously silent mother-in-law suddenly called. "Something terrible has happened. Come right now," she said, and hung up. Her tone was urgent. So we visited my in-laws' house for the first time in a while. Upon arriving, we could hear my mother-in-law and sister-in-law arguing inside. When we entered and urged them to calm down, my mother-in-law began explaining through tears. According to her, my sister-in-law had returned home suddenly saying she was getting divorced and demanding compensation. It turned out my sister-in-law had been cheating for years and was pregnant with her lover's child. She had planned to raise the child as her husband's, but midway, the lover suggested they terminate the pregnancy. She was afraid of being exposed by a DNA test someday. My sister-in-law had lied about having a miscarriage, but her husband found the medical bills and discovered she had an abortion. Apparently, her husband had already suspected something was off with the timing of the pregnancy and when they had tried for a child. When the abortion came to light, he suspected an affair and hired a detective, which confirmed my sister-in-law had been cheating for years. Enraged, her husband and his parents kicked her out and demanded compensation. As a housewife, my sister-in-law turned to my mother-in-law for help. However, after learning the whole story, my mother-in-law became furious, and a huge argument erupted. After hearing everything, my husband said, "It has nothing to do with us anymore." Then my mother-in-law clung to him. "Don't say that. I was deceived by Mandy. I regret kicking you out. I apologize. So let's live together again." I didn't think living on a pension alone would be this hard, thinking it was outrageous to conveniently want to cohabitate again. Just because she was in trouble, my husband felt the same. "Apologies won't fix what you did, Mom. Have you forgotten what you did? That was because I was brainwashed by Mandy. I was out of my mind back then. It's all Mandy's fault, I'm the victim." As my mother-in-law tried to switch allegiance to us, My sister-in-law exploded in anger. What? Blaming everything on me? Mom, you said you hated Stacy too. Shut up. The only one I hate is you. Are you going to abandon your own daughter? I have nowhere to live and no money. That's your fault for cheating. It has nothing to do with me. Just use your pension to support me. I have to pay compensation. I don't care about the compensation. I don't remember giving birth to a woman who gets pregnant by an affair. Get out of here now. With that, my sister-in-law ran out of the house. Left behind, my mother-in-law spoke to us kindly. Patrick, Stacy, I'm truly sorry about that time. I'll help with the baby. So rest assured. When are you coming back? My husband coldly replied to my mother-in-law's gentle smile. We have no intention of dealing with you anymore. I won't forget being told to give up on our child. But that was. No matter what you say now, it's useless. We're cutting ties with you and my sister. Cutting ties? So you won't let me see my grandchild? Of course not. I won't let someone who said to abort our child meet them. Please, forgive me. It's too late for anything you say. Ignoring my mother-in-law's cries like a child, my husband and I returned home. He had said everything I wanted to say, and I felt completely relieved. Later, my sister-in-law, having nowhere to go, wandered around before deciding she could only rely on my mother-in-law. She apologized and started living with her again. However, as my sister-in-law had been a housewife for years and couldn't find a job, living expenses fell on my mother-in-law's pension and savings. A few months after my sister-in-law returned, my mother-in-law's savings were depleted due to the compensation payments. Desperate, my mother-in-law called my husband repeatedly. Hello, Patrick? Please, send money. I can't live without it. Support? We're practically strangers now. I don't care about someone else's life. Don't contact us anymore, we'll be busy with the baby soon. Don't say that, let's live together again. I'm blocking you now. Please. My husband coldly cut off contact with my mother-in-law. From then on, there was no more contact from her. Rumor has it, pressured by my mother-in-law to get a job, my sister-in-law decided to become a nightclub worker. She then got involved with a married man and was again demanded compensation. It seems my sister-in-law, who had a bad drinking and men habit, continued her infidelity. She frequently caused trouble, and my mother-in-law was driven to mental illness and had to seek medical treatment. Despite this, the two continued to live under the same roof, constantly arguing. As for me, I safely gave birth to a healthy girl, and our family of 3 started a happy life. My parents were delighted with the birth of their granddaughter, and my mother has been a great help with childcare. My husband says he will never tell his mother our address or let her meet our daughter. It's only natural after what we went through with her and my sister-in-law. I want to cherish our happy life for my husband, who protected me from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. We plan to build a warm home and live happily ever after as a family of 3.